Hello, welcome back. Lovely to see you again. And this afternoon we've had the most fantastic event with Ed Davey, who's been up explaining about energy policy and climate change and lots of fantastic initiatives that he put in place as Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change during the coalition government. This morning I was out in Whitehaven with the hospital campaign group sorting out the petition, the 20,000 signatures that Annette Robson has and the team have collected. So huge well done to them. But now we're here and this is your chance to ask Ed Davey anything you would like to ask him. So please get your questions coming. And here is Mr. Ed Davey. And it is such a pleasure to have you here. Do you want to hold the phone?
Well, thanks, Rebecca. It's great to be here in Keswick and supporting your campaign for the Liberal Democrats here in Copeland. And this is my first Facebook Live, so hopefully it won't be too rotten. But it's been really good.
If it's really bad, it won't be worse than
right,
mine.
Okay. But it's been really good to talk to people here about energy issues and climate change, because it's really clear that people in Copeland, different communities across this large, beautiful constituency, are either helping us tackle climate change if they're working in the nuclear industry, or indeed renewables and energy efficiency and so on, or indeed are the victims of the climate change that we haven't been able to stop with the flooding that we've seen in parts of Cumbria. So I think climate change is one of the most significant issues facing our planet, and I think it's obviously affecting the lives here of people in Copeland. And the Liberal Democrats have always argued we need to take environment more seriously. In many ways, we've been the champions of environmental policy over a long time now. And when we got into government in the coalition, we took climate change very seriously and wanted to run that department. And the work we did to more than treble renewables, to ensure that nuclear had a future, to ensure we invested in energy efficiency, and the work that we did internationally in the European Union and the United Nations, I think played a part in moving the policy forward, listening to people, working with people, and making it happen for people and their families here and across the country and the world. So that's what we want to do.
Yeah, I think Ed explained so much about the detail of how he worked to build international agreements on climate change that was truly inspirational. But you spoke for 40 minutes there, and it really is worth trying to get to live events with politicians, because that's where the world really makes sense, because they can explain things at the level of detail that's actually needed to make sense of what they're talking about. And you can ask questions until you are truly satisfied. So thanks for that. I'm trying to think, what were the main thrusts? So you were explaining how you worked through. You were initially opposed to nuclear, and you explained why, because of your pursuit of carbon neutral energy policy, you came to realise that it was necessary. Could you explain that here?
Yeah, essentially, climate change science has showed in recent years that the threat to our future as human beings on this planet is great, and it's getting ever more great. In fact, the most recent climate change science is showing that with the sea rises, with more frequent extreme weather events, with the impact it's having on agriculture, with the impact it's having on flooding, it's affecting communities across the world. And the predictions of how worse it will get if we don't take action, are such that our world will become a very unpleasant place to live, and in parts of the world people won't be able to survive. There'll be mass movements of people. We're already seeing that in some places with some of the immigration refugees caused by people not taking climate change seriously. So for me, climate change is in many ways one of the issues of our age. And when you get to that realization that the threat of climate change is so serious, you move away from the old debates of the past of nuclear, renewables, energy efficiency and so on, and you say, we want all of it. In fact, that's what President Obama said. He said all of the above, because climate change is so serious that we need to use all human ingenuity that we have, whether it's in nuclear, renewables, storage, energy efficiency and so on, to tackle climate change and prepare our world for climate change. And I think that's, Rebecca, why I think I changed my position on nuclear. The Liberal Democrats changed, and we are now making the case in the context of climate change that we have to make these investments.
Okay. And Ed did go into an awful lot of detail, and I've listened to that, so you'll be able to question me in more detail now, and I'll really enjoy explaining some of those issues. Now, one of the things that you talked about with great pride was the work that you did on Liberal Democrat tidal lagoon policy to develop that. Could you possibly explain that here?
Yeah, when I was looking ahead for the 2020s and 2030s, how Britain will produce clean energy when all the coal power stations are closed, the gas power stations are closed, and so on, I got to the view that we needed a number of other options. Not just nuclear, we needed that. Not just renewables, we needed that, energy efficiency. And not just a technology or carbon capture and storage, but we needed a few more, because with the risk of climate change, we had to have more eggs in our basket. We had to make sure we were taking insurance policies, if you like, against the risk. And I wanted to find technologies that we could exploit in the UK that fit our circumstances. And we have in the UK some of the best tidal power resources in the world. We've actually got the second largest potential tidal power in the world. And the question was, how could we harness that? And I came to the conclusion that tidal lagoons were the best way to do that, because you could have a number of them. So if one didn't work, you had several others you could use. They were most pro-environment because the damage you get for something like a tidal barrier across the Severn is quite massive. Tidal lagoons don't have that sort of problem, and actually there's an argument that they can actually work with the environment and improve the environment. So I pushed tidal lagoons very hard. The Conservatives, or quite a lot of them, people like George Osborne, weren't very happy, didn't really like it. Even some of my officials didn't really like it. But I thought we had to pursue it. And so we got it to a point where it was on the agenda. And even the Conservatives, having seen the evidence, put it in their manifesto. And it's got an added advantage. It's not just about clean energy, reliable, predictable in the way that the tides are. It's also a flood defence. So in those areas where we will build tidal lagoons, creating jobs, improving our environment, getting the energy infrastructure, it could also help the other side of climate change, tackling the effects of climate change with flood defences. So that's why I'm so keen on it.
Okay, thanks for explaining that, because we are not going to have a tidal lagoon in Copeland, but we are going to have one just to the north of us, and it's been widely reported.
Hopefully.
Fingers crossed. And there are an awful lot of good consequences of Lib Dem policy that are still coming through. Let's just have a little look at your comments. Please do take your questions. Hi to all of you who said hi. Thank you for sharing the video. Please share the video to any pages, local pages in Copeland, Lib Dem pages. Hi again. So Christine has sent us this question. Focusing on carbon capture and storage, please would you say something about the budget overruns and the decision on of the 2015 government then to pull out of it?
Well, first of all, let's make clear what carbon capture and storage is. It looks like, Christine, you know about it. But it's making sure that if there are emissions coming from a power station or industrial plant, that we capture them and either use them for a byproduct, carbon capture and usage, or store them safely underground. Now, this is technology that people have been trying to get to work for some time. It has huge potential, and indeed, if you look at some of the work by the UN Climate Change Panel, look at the work of the International Energy Agency, they say if we don't have carbon capture and storage as one of the options, alongside nuclear and renewables and so on, it'll be far more expensive to decarbonise. So I think the decision of George Osborne and the Conservatives to close this down in 2015 was a huge mistake, absolutely huge mistake, because I think it's difficult to imagine decarbonising with fully, particularly industry and particularly parts of heating, without carbon capture and storage, CCS. It's a bit like the position on nuclear. You know, I came to the recognition that you couldn't decarbonise fully the power system without some nuclear there. And equally, I don't think you can decarbonise not just the power system, but heating and actually in industry without CCS. So a lot of rubbish was talked about CCS. Actually, it's an industry that Britain can be a world leader in, with our experience in the North Sea and the oil and gas industry, with our fantastic engineers and our universities. We are leading, and it was a real disaster for British industry, the Tories close it down.
Okay, do you want to read Stephen's question and have a go at that one?
I'm just wondering, Ed, what effect do you think leaving Euratom will have? Well, I think it's a disaster, Stephen. I'm glad you've asked the question, because I think it's one of the issues that should be on the minds of people of Copeland as they go to vote. Because whether you supported Brexit or opposed it, whether you leave or remainer, the Conservative decision to pull us out of Euratom is a crazy one. Now, for those who don't know who Euratom is, it's one of these safety standards bodies which ensures that we can import and export nuclear fuels to use in nuclear power stations and a few other things. And we're a member of Euratom by a treaty which is separate from the European Union. So it's legally possible to pull out of the European Union, as Brexiteers and Leavers wanted, but stay in Euratom. However, the Conservatives, because I think ideology, frankly, have decided to pull us out of Euratom as well, something that legally are not required. And that's really damaging, because if you think about the next negotiations, we're going to have to negotiate our way back into something we didn't have to pull out of, and that will be costly in terms of our negotiating capital. It weakens our hand in the negotiation, which is a bad thing whichever side of the fence you're on the European question. But if you want nuclear industry to thrive in this country, and it's so important to this area, it's going to undermine that, because if we don't get back into Euratom, if we don't have this type of safety regime, it's going to make it very difficult to import the fuels that our nuclear power stations will need. And given that existing nuclear power stations will still need some of that imported fuel, and it produces 20% of Britain's power supplies, this is a crazy decision. So whichever way you look at it, Conservatives are letting down the country on the decision to pull out of Euratom, and places like Copeland, it's really letting down. And I would just urge people in Copeland, as they go to the polls, if they're worried, believe the importance of nuclear industry, whether it's for jobs or for tackling climate change, they should recognise that the Conservatives have made a very bad decision, which will affect the lives of people in Copeland. And I believe that Rebecca Hanson is the only candidate who really understands this question and will take this to Parliament if you vote for her and ensure that the interests of Copeland are recognised.
You've got another one in from Christine here. Do you want to read that?
Christine, the government has signalled that it would seek to replace involvement with a differently likely... Yeah. Of course...
we're struggling to see more of your comments, Christine. You can see the first bit, but you've got the gist.
Okay, I think I've got the gist, Christine. The government will say they can replace Euratom. Question is how long it will take to do that. How much political capital we'll have to waste in doing that. And how long it will take people to be trained and skilled and brought over from other jurisdictions. So, we will have to create, I presume, if we don't get back into Euratom, which seems a bit stupid if you pulled out of it when you didn't need to, and you have to create another institution, you first of all have to build that. That has to be authorised and certified as credible in the eyes of not just Euratom, but the equivalent of Euratom for the United States, for Canada, and for and Japan, and for other countries we would deal with. And this would take a lot of time, a lot of money, and you can't guarantee it. So I think it's insane. Speaking as a former Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, I think it's an insane decision.
Yeah, we're running on soundbite politics. The Tories need an answer to something, so they dream up something. It looks like their press team are running government, and it's like, we need something to say on this. Let's write something on the back of an envelope and get everyone to say it, and then surely it'll all happen and be fine. You're also really critical of Theresa May's review of Hinkley Point, which was another car crash in action, wasn't it?
Well, let me just finish off Euratom, because essentially I think the Tories' justification to it, which is just nonsense, but anyway, their justification is that Euratom is one of these institutions which is governed or is overseen by the European Court of Justice. Now, the European Court of Justice is one of those bodies, it's mainly linked to the EU, but it's one of those bodies that when there's a dispute between two parties, two countries, there is a place to go to sort out that argument. So there's lots of these bodies internationally. The World Trade Organization has dispute resolution mechanisms between two countries who are disputing about trade, and so on and so forth. So it's quite sensible to have an international body that's dealing with international institutions. But in their hatred of everything European, they said, well, Euratom is governed by European Court of Justice, we've got to pull out of it. Failing to understand that if we created something ourselves and it was negotiating with Euratom, it would almost certainly have to be overseen by the European Court of Justice, or we'd have to create some other mechanism. It's not that all other countries are going to allow a dispute resolution, a court mechanism, to be British. Do you think Trump's going to do that with a UK-US trade agreement? I mean, these people, I'm afraid, people like Fox and Johnson and David Davis, people negotiating these, seem to be quite ignorant of how international negotiations work.
Yeah, can I just clarify my point before? I was clearly saying that Theresa May's comments on and her understanding of Hinkley Point were a car crash in action, not that the power plant was.
No.
Just make that right. Shall we pick up, I mean, just to summarise, you were very critical of the way that she handled that.
Yeah.
Let's not go into that, let's carry on with the questions. Lib Dem's stance on nuclear power.
Well, it's in favour of nuclear power. I passed the resolution when I was Secretary of State, and we believe that nuclear has a role to play because of the threat of climate change. Now, I'm not going to say there aren't some people in the Lib Dems who are against it, just like there are some people in the Conservatives, the Labour Party, against it. But unlike, say, Jeremy Corbyn, whose track record of always being against it until the Copeland by-election, or the Greens, who seem to put their opposition to nuclear ahead of climate change concerns, we've taken a realistic, practical position on this, that it's all about how we protect our planet. So I am now in favour of nuclear power. The Liberal Democrat position is we're in favour of nuclear power.
Yeah, Liberal Democrat positions, when you look at them at first glance, they sound almost like sound bites like Conservative positions, but with Liberal Democrat positions, it's the tip of the enormous iceberg of work and research and consultation that's gone into creating that position. And more with the Tory government, it's something that was created in the press office to answer a question that they didn't want to not have an answer to. And it's really important that the public see the difference between Liberal Democrat policy and the policy that's coming out of the other parties. I joined the Lib Dems because I was horrified by Michael Gove, and the only way I could see to make a difference was through really clear policy challenge. And the Lib Dems were the only party that were doing all that detailed work that could challenge him, because they simply knew in tremendous depth what they were talking about and why it mattered. You brought in the Climate Change Act 2008 and then that question ends, I'm afraid. So Ed also talked about the incredibly productive international work he did, motivating people, working with countries to create climate change agreements, and then using Europe to influence the world. And you talked just about the madness of not being part of that. Is there anything else you want to say on that?
Well, just that, when I was Secretary of State, I spent a lot of time negotiating international trade agreements and international climate change agreements. And the carbon budgets and carbon commitments that are in the Climate Change Act are incredibly important, so that this country can credibly reduce our greenhouse gases and meet our international and domestic legal obligations. So I'm a big fan of the Climate Change Act, a big fan of the carbon budgets that are in there. But the question you have to ask yourself is, even if Britain was the best country in the world on climate change action, we need other countries to act as well. So, as Rebecca said, I did a lot of work at the European Union and the United Nations to work with other countries to take action. And you have to work with other countries to succeed on climate change. And the European Union actually was the most effective place to do that, because you were working with people who you got to know over a period of years. And we were the most ambitious country in the European Union. We wanted to take action more than any other country. And we were able to do that because we had a place at the European Council on Environment and European Council on Energy. And I realised that other countries weren't stepping up to the plate to make sure we were ambitious on this. And so as a Liberal Democrat in the coalition, I really pushed that through something I called the Green Growth Group. and we made sure that the EU had the most ambitious position on reducing greenhouse gases by 2030. And that meant that we were able to go into the United Nations talks from a position of strength, able to influence other countries, including the United States, China, India, Brazil, and so on. I was proud of that, actually, Rebecca, because Liberal Democrats in government made a real difference, even though the Tories weren't really that supportive. So that's one of the reasons why I would like you, Rebecca, to be there.
Thank you very much. Let's see, Christine has said, read the 2008 Act. Could you say something about the carbon budgets and our carbon commitments?
Yeah.
That'll be the last question I'll take, I think. Thanks for all the sharing, guys. Please keep sharing.
Thank you. The carbon budgets are rolled of every 5 years. So we've now had 5 carbon budgets, legislated for. The 5th carbon budget is from 2028 to 2032. The 4th carbon budget, which I was involved in, is from 2023 to 2027. And what these budgets say is that after a lot of analysis by the Climate Change Committee and other people and government, is trying to work out what our budget should be for the carbon emissions over a certain period to make sure that we are tackling climate change. And they say that the UK can only emit a certain amount of tons of greenhouse gases over a particular period. And it's a way of ratcheting down, continually pushing down to reduce our carbon emissions, and it means that it's built into the government machinery, into the Treasury, into the Department of Transport, into the Department of Energy, and so on, so that they have to, when they're making policy decisions, take account of the climate. So really important stuff, and something that ought to be better known about, but it acts as a big discipline. And it's one of the reasons why I think it's a real shame that we're not part of the EU, because we're able as part of the EU to push our experience, our understanding, and make others be as ambitious as us. And we have credibility because of the Climate Change Act. And not being at the table undermines that, and that's very sad.
Thank you so much. So, I think I need to stop the questions there. I've got a lot to do to prepare for hustings in Whitehaven tonight. We're trying to create some flyers to give people with information about the live events we'll be doing. In the morning, Tim Farron will be here. We won't have time to do a Facebook Live because his time is booked solid for major press, unfortunately. But I have confirmed Chris Davies, MEP of the Year 2015, is going to be up next Sunday to do a Facebook Live on why the single market matters. So I'm really looking forward to that. He's brilliant on that. And I'm looking forward to confirm some other guests. If you're watching and you're a Lib Dem with something to say, or if you're in Copeland and you have something to say about something you're passionate about that's linked to government policy, please get in touch. I'd love to have you here on Facebook Live with me. Just want to say thank you so much, Ed. It's
welcome.
Just been a huge privilege to do this with you. For me, standing for election is getting the opportunity to do all these amazing things and to hopefully bring politics and democracy closer to people. And good. Thank you for being part of that.
No, well, very good luck to Rebecca, and please make sure you vote for her.
Thank you. Bye now.